Hello and welcome to our Friday webinar, our 5th anniversary webinar, by the way. Yeah. If you're,
That's great.
yeah. Welcome everybody. And we've come so far from way back in April 3rd. I think that was the date Brenda gave us. April 3rd is 2020 is when we started doing these webinars, which is just mind-boggling. 5 years ago, we've been doing these webinars almost every week for 5 years, and we have great experts with us like Lisa. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for having me for this special day.
It's just amazing. And so I want to know where everyone's joining us again in the chat. If you could just let us know where you're coming from today. And also, I am just really curious if you were with us on day one when we first did our first webinar, like raise your hand, because I'm just curious how many people have been. Oh, let's see. So if you were with us on our very first webinar when I probably was at my most novice, terrible hosting form, raise your hand, because that would have been April of 2020. We had Dr. Stephanie Lamb with us. So I mean, and I know okay, we've got some people that have been with us since day one, which is awesome. Wow. And we just keep learning and we just kind of started rolling with the momentum of getting experts on with us, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that for the year ahead here. Okay, Lisa. So today you are launching, this is also another special occasion because you will be launching a new series.
Yeah.
This is very timely, so to speak. If you want to just give us a little bit of what it's going to cover, and then I'll let you take it over. I'm sure you have a fabulous share for us.
Yes. Okay, so this is going to cover pretty much bird keeping through the years. I started out in the 70s, but I also have a lot of fun facts that go back to the beginning of bird keeping in 1800s. So I'll be putting them in there in between, trying to cover different things like how cages were different, and avian medicine was in its infancy, and what kind of birds we can get and where they were coming from. So there's a lot of cool little fun facts, and I hope people enjoy it. And while I'm known for grays, I started out like the majority of people with a parakeet. And actually, March 17th is my 49th year of living with birds. So that's a little scary.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I've lived with just about everything, with the exception of a macaw and an eclectus. Whether it was my sister's bird or my dad's birds or my birds, I mean, we had just about everything. So, but that's what this is going to cover through the years. We're starting out in the 70s, and I'm going to take it right up to today and how very fortunate we are today with all the advances we've had.
Yeah.
So, and we'll
Can you imagine,
continue.
can you imagine if we had webinars back in the day, like this, educational forums like this? I mean, we didn't, of course, have Zoom or anything like that. But that would have gone.
Right, especially for a child starting out, what kind of resources did we really have? It was kind of like live and learn. And I mean, I have letters here that I wrote when I was probably 9 years old. I'm in my kitchen today because some of the items I have came out of my hope chest, and some of them are from the 60s. So they're kind of stinky, and I didn't want them to be around the birds. So,
Okay. Okay.
so if you see me sneezing or sniffling, it's because I can smell whatever's going on here.
Okay. Okay. So I want to mention that Brenda is back with us today. So welcome back, Brenda. She was on hiatus for a little bit, but she's back with us, and she's been with us from day one with these webinars too. So working behind the scenes, she's the one that does all the hard work, and I just sit here and talk, and she does all the real work. So I was also going to say I have some announcements at the end of towards the end. So some special announcements and giveaways. So stay tuned toward the end of the webinar for those. And Lisa, I'm gonna let you take it away.
I do have a question before I take off. There's a giant raised hand on my screen.
Is
Do you
there?
have that? Yes.
No. I think that's because I asked whoever been with us for day one. Okay.
Okay.
We
All
just
right.
you
You
can
see me
lower
go
your
like this? I'm looking. That's gone. Giant
Okay.
hand is gone.
Very
Okay.
hands-on. Okay. All right.
It worked. All right,
That's why
great.
these webinars are so awesome. We never know what's going to happen. So,
Right. So I'm glad I asked. So whenever you guys are ready, I'm sitting here, let's see, trying to go back and get my view so I can see everything. Just bear with me 1 second. Uh,
so it's going to be like a show and tell as well. It sounds like I'm excited.
yes. So, okay, for some reason I cannot get you guys down either. You gotta love all the new things every time we log in here. Gallery. Okay. Well, I just got more things on my screen, so you'll see me going like this, trying to look around things. So we'll just have to deal with it. All right. Just let me know whenever you are ready.
Ready to go. Ready to go.
Okay. I see. All right. Oops. Okay, no laughing at my photos. All right. So I want to thank everybody for joining in. If you can in the chat, let's keep everybody going crazy there. Let me know if you're interested when you started out and how old you were. I'm wondering how many youngsters we had. I am always one for fostering young children to become interested in aviculture. You see a lot of people saying, no, it's not a good idea. Don't get your kid a bird. I don't know if I'm the exception, but I don't think I could have had a better companion growing up. And I have not lived one single day in those 49 years without a bird. So whether even when I travel, if I'm going to a pet store to visit the birds, or if I'm going to a friend's house who has birds, I'm always around birds. And some of my best friends, of course, came through having birds. So welcome to Parrots, Past and Present, starting out in the 70s. So here you have somewhere around 1968. That's me. And I have always been a huge animal lover. My mother went out shortly after I was born and bought my first little pet. And that was Chrissy, my little poodle. And I don't know why my mother dressed me like that, but it's probably my trauma towards stripes and polka dots right now in adult life. But it shows that at a young age, I was interested in animals. Unfortunately, I was also a pretty sick child. So, we had dogs, we had cats. We've always had poodles. We didn't really have anything else in the house. So, any other type of dog. So when I was younger, I was always sick, in and out of the hospital. Wasn't a good thing. Finally, I had to go for all those shots. Back then, the people that were with me that had to go through it, what they would do is they would give you a shot in the arm, several shots up and down your arms, and the ones that blew up and bothered you was what you were allergic to. And I remember being that young and seeing one that says pop, and I was scared. I never said anything to my mom, but I was scared that it meant dad and that I was going to be allergic to my dad. But what ended up happening was I was allergic to dogs and cats. So unfortunately, we had Angora cats. We had to rehome them. The poodles stayed. We didn't have as many, but you could still see Chrissy's still there with me. She lived to have a very long, happy life. But after getting rid of, and Chrissy, of course, was getting older there, and she was losing interest in me. So now I'm actually able to have an animal to interact with, do things with. And my dog is now getting older, doesn't want to run around with, this little 8-year-old kid. And so I was kind of depressed. We also moved around a lot because my parents were divorced. So, just as I would get interested in school and meet friends, we would move again. So what my mother decided to do one day is, just on a fluke, because I was upset for getting rid of the cats, and she took me to a pet store. Oh, I was 8 in that photo. She took me to a pet store, and lucky her. There I found an adorable little yellow parakeet that I was completely enthralled with. And my mother decided that maybe this would be a great companion for me to keep me busy when we move. We can take her with us. We told the guy we were going to take a bird. I wanted the yellow one. It was the only yellow one that was in there. The gentleman tried to talk me out of it because it was an older bird. The owner had died, and the children sent the bird back to the pet store along with a white one that was in there. But I wanted that yellow one because I loved Tweety Bird, like, of course, most of us. So the average cost of a parakeet back in 1976 was $2. Minimum wage was about $2.30. So for my mom, who was a single mother, it was a lot to go out and spend money on something like this, but we did. She also bought me a very nice cage. Now, the people who have been around for quite a while recognize the Hoey name. That was one of the, in my opinion, growing up as a child, having so many different cages through the years, until recently with the advances that we have and the nice newer cages. This was one of the best cages when I was young, and we did pick out that exact cage. Now you'll see some of the pictures I got on here. They're going to come from like Amazon, eBay. It'll be on the bottom where I was able to find them, because obviously I don't have good, clear pictures from 49 years ago. I have some, but they were taken by an 8-year-old child, so you're just going to have to play along with me. So we bought the cage. Tweety, whose name was originally Patina, and we changed it to Tweety. Tweety came home. Now, when Tweety came home, I put my finger, the guy told me, you have to put your finger in the cage and eventually the bird will hop up. Well, I put my finger in the cage, bird hopped right up. I thought I was a bird whisperer. So I was enthralled with Tweety, and come to find out, Tweety was also 8 years old, just like me when we got her. So what resources did I actually have as an 8-year-old child back in 1976? My mother knew nothing about birds. We didn't know anybody else who had birds. Who are we supposed to ask? The later generations in the 80s and beyond, they were lucky because I had a whole bunch of magazines that came out. We had bird clubs. There was a lot of different ways to learn, but I was just a lost child. So American Cage Bird Magazine began publication in 1928, which is fabulous. And I actually have a good portion of these magazines that somebody gave me. But again, this is not geared towards an 8-year-old child. Look at that. It was 60 cents a copy in 1977. You also had books that came out that were, I'm sure, great for adults. You can see this one was done in 1960. So there were some avenues out there. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have a lot of things. And this is how we had to rely on stuff. So in 1973, I believe it was the original Parrots of the World came out. And that is a wonderful book with tremendous illustrations that are fantastic. The later version, a lot of you might recognize. I actually have this. My sister did end up buying it for me. And this one, I believe, came out, it was the improved edition in 1978. It's pretty to look at, but again, it wouldn't have helped somebody like me that didn't have all the information. So again, the people that have had birds for a while, you're going to recognize that the pet library had a lot of books that were out there. And it was in the 70s, actually in the 60s when they started. So these books here, they were actually mine. They might be somewhere again with all the moves. I could not find them. They might be in one of my multiple hope chests that I just couldn't get to. But I actually bought my books at a school book fair. So, remember, we used to have our little naps and our little milk for, snacks during school. And then we look forward to going to the book fair. And then, I was always excited to see what kind of bird books came out that were good for me. And actually, these are fantastic because the intended audience was ages 9 to 12 years old. So these helped a lot. I actually, let me see if I can see something here. Okay. So I actually have, if you could see it, my canary one. And I'll be reading some stuff out of this as well. But this is, let's see if I can get to it. Okay. I have some things on the screen that are making it a little difficult to see, but it's a toss-up. Back in the 1960s, when this book was being written, they were talking about whether there were more dogs or more parakeets that are actually being kept as pets. For centuries, the dogs held the record as man's favorite animal, but now in the 60s, late 60s, the parakeet was rapidly taking place. So this was really the spot I had to go and learn from. I'm moving stuff around again. So I'm going to read a couple things to you for a young child. And as I was rereading these again, it kind of made me realize why I still do some of the things I do today. Probably because I read this book and I started as a child doing it. So as far as feeding the birds, it says you should have 1 cup of food and another for water, 1 or 2 treat cups. They should be given supplementary conditioning food, live growing greens, which we know now are sprouts, and to cover the cage at night to protect the birds from drafts. So that's all stuff that I still do, and that's probably where it comes from. The book talks about song food, molting food, and those great old oats and groats that we used to give. All these things are still out there, probably with different manufacturers or maybe the same. And then hopefully you can see this. I'm sorry if you can't. It's called a pacifier. So I had those in all my cages. It's one of those little dangerous little bells that you have on there that the toenails can still get stuck on, and then little bristles that came down. So these were things that were suggested to be in the birds' cages. And you'll be able to see from some of my pictures, that's what I had. So another thing they talked about in here that we know not to do now is they talk about sandpaper perches, a sanded tube perch, to keep the birds' feet in condition. It saves from scraping the perches clean. They say perches should never be washed. Scrape them with a clean knife or a perch brush. So a perch brush was actually like a C-shaped piece of wood, and it had all these hard bristles coming out. I used to use the sandpaper perches because I was told to do it. Once I've learned better, we stopped it, and I did not sell them in my store. Then we go down here and it says cleanups mean parakeet cleaning too. Parakeets, like little boys, don't like baths, but they do love water. I found that hilarious. Sorry to the guys out there. I'm sure you do like your baths. It also talks about what we know now as flooding. It's telling you different ways to give the birds bath. But one phrase in here, it says, most parakeets once broken to the bath. I take that as flooding. Maybe others might take that as wrong. That just kind of means forcing the animal to do it, not of free will. So this is how they talked about it. I actually had the little ones that went on the door. It talks about that later on in here. And then down here, where I circled, it says buy parakeet seed and parakeet seed only. So that's what we were told to do back then. That's what I did. Again, I was 8 years old. Okay, so let me see here. Oh, they also talk about in the book nest box next, and we thought that's where the birds had to go to sleep at night. And you can see that in some of my pictures, there is a little nest in there, because that's what I thought we were supposed to do. Now we know better. We do not want to try to encourage nesting. So many things could go wrong. It's different if you are a breeder and you know what you're doing, but it's not for the novice. And if you don't know what you're doing, there can be a lot of problems. So growing up, Tweety was often the subject for book reports, show and tell, science projects. I would pretty much take that bird everywhere with me. And I would buy these books at book fairs. I would write book reports on it. Nobody else in the classroom was interested in it, but I would bring Tweety in for show and tell. Everybody else was busy bringing their stuffed animals or whatever, and there I am with my cage and my Tweety. And I pretty much did it every time we had, show and tell. She was part of my science projects. Of course, I have little pictures that I drew of birds and tried to explain to people how to take care of birds. That's how interested I was. And even my sister made me a Sylvester costume when I was young, so I can go trick-or-treating with Tweety. So this is actually my sister in the costume. There's no pictures of me because, again, I was small. Somewhere in the years that got lost, but it was a magnificent costume that she made for me. So going back to some of the food, this is pretty much what was told that we should feed them back in the 70s. I remember specifically going to the food store, buying this orange red box, and that's what my birds got. There's also gravel and grit. We gave them that too, because that's what we were told to do. Now we know we should really be on a formulated diet. Some species do well on more of a seed diet, depending on where they come. But for the most part, we want them. We don't want them ever on an all seed diet, but we want to make sure that they're having a formulated diet in there, and of course, all your veggies, your other stuff we talk about all the time. And through the years, we've also found that parakeets and cockatiels, the smaller hookbills, they do not need gravel and grit. It's only the softbills, your finches, your canaries. They're the ones who need the grit to be able to digest all the food. So here we have some fun facts. Lafeber, informally in 1973, when parrot nutritional products were milled in the back of their veterinary clinic, creating the very first commercial bird food pellet. This was when I was about 5, so I didn't really know anything about it. And then the creator, Dr. Lafeber, graduated from State University College of Veterinary Medicine in 1949 and opened a Niles Animal Hospital in Niles, Illinois. In the mid-50s, he began treating birds, and by the 1960s, his practice was one of the largest pet bird hospitals in the United States. So, starting back then, I wanted that in there to show you this was starting to take off, and there were avenues for people who knew how to get there. Luckily for me, when I was young, we didn't have any issues, and my birds ended up staying with me. I never knew that they even needed to go to the vet. So looking back at some of my pictures, my birds were obviously lacking perches, toys, and did not have a good diet. One thing they did have was each other. So in this picture here, you can see there's obviously we're multiplying. So we have Tweety, Petey was the white one, and then Chirpy. I know, very original names. We had gone back the day after we bought Tweety to go back and get the white bird that came with it. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, hopefully the bird had a good life. Somebody had already bought that bird because it was actually a white English budgie and it was very pretty, but I needed that yellow. So we went back, they weren't there. I came home with Petey. My mother thought Chirpy with the colors because he was very pale aqua blue. My mother liked that one, so we came home with two of them. So luckily in that cage, they were able to fit. But if you could see, there's really no perches in there, which I don't know what I was thinking. There's the nest. Tweety's hanging on the side of the cage. And these were swings because that was what we were told to do. So, you know, I don't remember whether Tweety sat there on the perch with the other guys. I mean, they were all young except for Tweety. But that's luckily I did have a decent sized cage. Majority of the cages, you can see down here in the left-hand corner, were a little bit smaller. That's actually from the 60s and 70s. And I have to say Susan Chamberlain was a big help with doing this because she's done a lot with the history of cages. And that was a photo that she gave me to use. So that was, I believe, one of her cages. So cages have become highly collectible through the years. Looking back at some of the cages I had and now seeing what they're going for on eBay, it's astounding. Because I probably tossed mine to, like most people, upgrade. So, and of course, here's the nest boxes we were told to give. And I don't know why that little baby birdie is really, you know, sitting on it, on eggs. But anyway, so these are the things that we were told to do in my little book from being a child, and that's what we did. Why they did, oh, look right there in the middle. That is one of those pacifiers. See, I told you I had them. That dangerous little bell on top, and these were bristles that hung out, and this was a little wood piece. So while my guys didn't have a lot of things to do in their cages, except for the typical little cat bell lattice toys, they had some of them, they had some plastic rings. There weren't really a lot of toys out there for them at that time, especially that I was aware of. So I would make things for them. This was one of my play stands for them. You could see Tweety here sitting on the sandpaper perch. This was actually the beginning of the 80s because we have Doodles and Dee, my canaries, in there. But they had things to do outside of the cages. They were fully flighted. They came out and spent a lot of time out there. And then all of a sudden, we added Dinky to our flock. And I can't believe I remember everybody's names, but Dinky was an English budgie. And this picture is so old that you can see the little hole in the picture right here. I lived in a log cabin. So and some of the other places that my mother rented were knotty pine. So I had to actually put thumbtacks through my pictures so I can hang them on the wall. So not only were the birds in my room, I had pictures of them hanging on the wall. So, you know, when typical kids doing other things, you know, outside playing, I'm inside playing with my birds. So then this was my flock, and you could see how old it is by that pattern on their cage cover. So again, here's the sandpaper perches. I did obviously end up putting more perches in there for everybody to sit. Here's that little ring toy I told you about. And then what ended up happening was we ended up getting quite a few more budgies. And, you know, again, single mother, she didn't have a lot of money to go out and buy these cages. A lot of the cages weren't big enough to hold birds or multiple birds. So what I ended up doing was I ended up getting a great big cardboard box. Me with my young mind. I mean, it was probably 24 by 24. And then we went out and we got it's some kind of, I'm not gonna say chicken wire. It was little squares. Other people would probably know the correct name of it. But it was a metal mesh that I cut the box. I used the box as a top and a bottom, and then I formed this wire mesh around the middle, and I hung all the perches and everything in there. Lucky me, the birds didn't chew through the cardboard to get out, because they were in there for quite a while. But the cage was taller than I was, and my birds can comfortably sit in there because, if I'm not mistaken, I had about 12 of them at one time. So this was big enough, for all their different perches and their food dishes. Nobody had to compete for anything. And that was my ingenious thing. I think I even took on the cardboard, I think I even put wallpaper on it to make it look pretty. So, and that was the cage that a young child put together. Now we know that it was probably aluminum or something at that time. And now we know you shouldn't, really use that unless you wash it down really good. And I didn't do anything like that. So this is one of the first times I went away and I was concerned, and I wrote to my mother. And I could tell you my life has not changed much from age 9 or 10 to now, because you can even ask my husband that usually the first thing I ask is, how are my birds when I am away? So here I am, wanting to make sure my mom's taking care of the birds. And then I'm telling her that we're trying to get my brother. I was with my sister in Florida. I was trying to get my brother to go off the water slide. So those were the important things in my life, my birds and the water slide at that age. And there's Tweety. You can see in this picture, she appears to be sitting on a basket. Now, a couple decades later, what a lot of people did was they came out with the idea of taking a basket and putting some material in the bottom, and then you can hang all the toys on the arch or the handle of the basket. I guess I made some kind of play stand for her at that time, thinking with that in mind, and I would carry Tweety around and she would go everywhere with me. The next challenge was, here I am, age 11, and you guys are going to laugh about this. Don't let my size there confuse you. My mother was extremely short, and it looks like I might have boots on. But we ended up going from New Jersey up to Mystic Seaport. I did not want to go because I didn't want to leave my birds, but I didn't have a choice. So here I am leaving my birds with some stranger, her boyfriend's friend, because I didn't have any family to take care of them. Again, I didn't have a lot of friends because we moved around a lot. So somebody had to take care of my birds. And I guess I decided that I needed to write an instruction manual for somebody else to take care of the birds. So while my sister had this in her hope chest, which I didn't know she had, I'm going to read to you because it's like I wrote it yesterday. It says, feed. Take the bowls out of the cage and blow the open seeds off and add more seeds on top. Make sure the food bowl is 3/4. Notice the THS over there. All the way full. Fresh water. Take both yellow and blue water bowls out, wash and rinse thoroughly, and put more fresh water in blue and yellow bowl. Water. Yellow and blue water. Be sure the birds don't get out. To get out. Gravel. The birds need plenty of gravel, and make sure the dish is 3/4, again with the THS, of the way full. I could read that. My sister's like, you're not going to be able to read that. I'm like, yeah, I know what that says because I did it. And then cuttle bones. The cuttle bones are attached to the side of the cage unless they're knocked down. If so, please then put them back up. The birds like soft music and company. What child is really thinking about that? Please do not take them out because they can break their necks on the windows, mirrors, and walls. Also cover them at night. Thank you. So my sister has that in her hope chest, and I could tell you that I can't see myself, so hopefully you guys can see this. So this simple 1-page little letter that I originally wrote when I was 11 years old quickly turned into a 5-page letter that I wrote to my now husband when I went down to visit my sister in Florida. It talks to him about don't leave them alone. They'll follow you where you walk and sit. Don't squish Emma. She'll fly to the floor. This was in my hope chest and I had to laugh when I was reading it. Tells them what to give them for breakfast, what to give them for breakfast on Sundays. You know, their pellets it goes on to. It has all their veterinarian information written down, and it's on a little wire so I could just hang it up so he would have no problem finding it. So I do the same thing with my bird sitter now, even though they have birds of their own. So it's just something I feel I need to do to make me feel better every time I go away. So we have some fun facts. The American Association of Zoo Veterinarians was founded in 1946. The American Association of Avian Pathologists was founded in 1957. The Association of Avian Veterinarians didn't come along until 1980, and I believe it was a combination of those two organizations, the AAZB and AAAP, together that formed the Association of Avian Veterinarians. The first meeting of the AAV was held in Kalamazoo in 1980, and there was about 100 people that showed up for lectures and workshops. Now this organization has blossomed and grown to people all over the world that attend, whether it's in person or they do a lot of online continuing education. They have their magazines. It's a great organization. Thankfully, it's evolved to what we need now as pet owners, and it will continue to do so. The American Board of Veterinary Practitioners, which certifies specialists, was established in 1978. I didn't know that either. I had to look that up. So this was from Dr. Crystal Paula for one of their journals. So bird cages have seen many incarnations through the ages. They've been plain utilitarian boxes designed to simply prevent the occupant from escaping. Ornate jewel-encrusted palaces fabricated for status symbol pets, and Victorian wonders engineered and built for discriminating collectors. The more elaborate cages weren't very practical, and the practical ones weren't very attractive. It didn't seem to matter how much until the exotic bird hobby began to grow. So these are some cages. That quote was from Susan. These are some cages from around the world. You can see that a lot of times they were more just to keep them from escaping or for the looks in the home. Now, there are some cage companies today that still make some gorgeous styled, more wooden cages that fit in with your furniture. They're very nice. I see people try to do it as well, but we also have to consider, I mean, the ones that are made professionally, they know how to keep the birds away from the wood, just like I did not know how to keep the birds away from the cardboard. It was just kind of like, hopefully. So there are some, gorgeous ones out there now. They are going to be more for the collector. But again, these are the cages through the years. This was offered. Something like you see the Indonesian, there's still kind of ones like that, not as, I guess, elaborate with the wood on top, but a lot of the bird markets that you'll see overseas are going to be more of that style because they're just had the bird in there just to sell them, and that's what the people take them home in. These are some of the cages through the years as well, with the exception of flight cages designed for budgies and canaries. Many of the bird homes on the market were unsuitable for avian habitation. Intricate scrollwork and decorative model proved impossible to clean, as you could see with some of these. Just imagine some bird poop thrown on some of those. And a lot of times they had little curlicues and decorative pieces that the birds would get their heads or limbs caught in. cage manufacturing development countries often contain paint or welds tainted with lead or other harmful compounds. You will still find cages that people sometimes are looking more for a deal, and they'll go on to online places and you can't tell the manufacturer, you don't know where it came from, but hey, it's a really good price. It's really not a really good price if your bird ends up getting sick. So you do have to be aware of the companies that you are using. Probably back in, let's say, probably sometime after 2010-ish, there were some concerns about lead and zinc in the cages that were on the market, and a lot of the companies actually went out and got proof, did sampling on their cages to make sure there was no lead and zinc, to show their clients that it was safe to use their cages. If you could see in these pictures, the top left picture, that's Susan's. That's actually an adorable little cage there. A lot of these are brass. And if you could see, let's see, where's the camera? My cages were brass as well, because that's what was out and about. So luckily, I didn't have any issues, but you do have to be careful. And we've gotten away from that. And we're going to stainless steel, and we're going to powder coated cages. You still will find some of the brass ones on the market. I would be careful with that and possibly speak to your veterinarian to get their thoughts on it before you decide to use something like that. In the late 70s, stores specialized in tame birds began to appear in metropolitan areas. Captivated by birds' antics and friendly personalities, people began to buy the bigger birds like the parrots, the cockatoos, and macaws in a lot more increasing numbers. Cockatiels, I see that spelt wrong. This was from an audio. Budgies and other small birds rode the tail feathers of the larger cousins, becoming even greater in popularity. Most of the birds went home in new cages. So the cage you're going to see there to the right, I got online, and you're going to see that a lot of the older cages were like that. And I would say that's going to be more of your macaw cage because it's longer to the floor for the tail. But you can kind of see, again, it's an old picture, the curlicues right around here. Okay, the decorative work. That's where a lot of birds would get caught. Again, you don't see any perches. This is the door. Okay, so you see a ring in the middle for the bird to sit on. Okay, that's what a lot of the cages look like as they were getting bigger, and they were extremely expensive when they were first coming out. Basic square cages for medium parrots were available. Quality depended on the manufacturers. Safer products started to be used to be made for them through the years. For the larger cages, though, in my experience, the food and water dishes, I remember, having the brass cage like this, and those food and water dishes you see right there, a lot of times they were aluminum. So they would get all funky colors, and I never thought they were safe to use to begin with. But then again, they didn't really have many big food dishes that were plastic. That came along later. They started after the aluminum ones, and they started to coat it with a paint, but a lot of time the paint came off. So there's a lot of growth through the years to try to make things safer. This bird looks like it was a little bit more lucky than mine. You can see it did have an appropriate size perch there. It had a couple toys in it, and everything has just, gotten better through the years. People started to complain about the messes from the bird cages. This is one of my first larger cages, and this was a king's cage. It did come with a seed skirt because some of the cage companies started putting a seed skirt around it, but that material you see there, I actually made that myself. The room was small, me bumping into the metal on the cages, having to have the cages farther out from the wall. And, it was a wonderful cage. We had that until we went to stainless steel. But there was different ways that, people decided to keep the messes to themselves. And then in later years, there were cage companies that came out and they would actually work with you. I think it was was it the 80s? No, it was probably the 90s. There was the California Cage Company came out, and I happened to meet them at a show because they started having bird shows. And I would go out to Long Island to their expo every year. And the cage company came out there and they actually worked with me because I had cockatiels at that time. And again, I had them in this big homemade thing that I did because I wanted them to be together. And I ended up having a real pretty cage made. It was a big macaw cage, but it had 1/2-inch bar spacing. And so people started to get involved with, how they wanted to make their cages. I had a girlfriend at that time that actually had her cage have a great big wheel, like a wheelbarrow on one end, so and a handle so she could pick it up and push it around. It had one wheel on the front, 2 on the back, and a big handle. And we got to pick our colors, the bar spacing. So we all got involved on what we really wanted to do, which was great. King's Cages was, well, that's because my King's Cage is there, was established in 1975 by Richard King and now run by his son Andrew, representing the second generation of family ownership. They were originally out on Long Island. Then I got to meet them personally and they helped me a lot with my store in New Jersey. They actually came and helped me set up the night before I opened to make sure I was representing them well. So it was very sweet of them to drive, the 70 miles to come help me set up my store for opening because I had no idea what I was doing. And now they have gone down and merged with Bonka. And they are now down in Fort Lauderdale. So since me moving to South Carolina from New Jersey, I've really missed being able to go up and see my distributors and root through what they had there and pick out the trees and have all that kind of fun on my days off. I am now thankful that they're down in Florida because when I go down to Florida to be with my sister and my family, I can go down there and visit my distributors and my friends I've made through the years. So I'm happy about that. So we have some fun facts. In 1972, the first accreditation procedures for the animal technician programs were instituted under Standing Committee of the American Veterinary Medical Association. It wasn't until 1989 that the AVMA officially adopted the term veterinary technician. New York passed the first law requiring the licensing of animal health technicians as a way to verify their completed education, creating that official AHT credential. So when you're going to the vets, you don't realize that the people that are helping you are going through all this continuing education and helping you out, because that was the career that they chose. The oldest veterinary school in the United States is the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine, founded in 1884. I can tell you I've been there plenty of times when I lived in Central Jersey. I met a lot of great board certified vets there who went out and went on to do their own practices or work for the government. Some great stuff. The first veterinarians to become board certified in avian practice were Dr. Joel Murphy. I don't know him personally. And Dr. Greg Harrison, both diplomats in the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners in avian practice. Couldn't find a year, so if anybody knows, please let me know. I'd be interested. And one of the first behaviors to work with veterinarians was Liz Wilson, and she's one of my mentors. She was fun to listen to. So these are some of the cages I've had through the years. All right. Again, you can see 2 of them were brass. And the third one here on the right, that was actually wood. That was wood and bamboo. And I had bought that for my canaries. not realizing at first, you know, they weren't really using the top because canaries really don't climb. So you can't have a hook bill in there because it's all wood and they're going to get out. You buy it for a songbird who cannot climb, and they don't go up and down, you know, like Tigger. So, you know, the hook bills need a wider cage to be able to bounce back and forth. So again, through the years, learning and growing, you know, this is what I went through, and I eventually put the fern in the wooden cage. And another thing back then is we did not, as you see from the pictures, we did not have a lot of perch options. So you had the littler tiny cages. A lot of times they have a metal bar in there. You'll see that a lot of times overseas as well. And one of the things that really irks me was when we're online and people from overseas, it's a different culture, they're learning, they're growing, and you have a lot of people that will put them down for having that metal perch. Well, how do they know? It came with the cage. I think back to me being a child, I used what came with the cage. I didn't know. So if we use kindness and teach them the bird benefits, if we're nasty and berate them, the bird pays the price because the person leaves. So you have to keep that in mind. So as you go forward and you're trying to help people online and they have something like that that might be a little questionable, remember, just use a little bit of honey versus vinegar. So here we have some perches. Again, you're going to see in this cage up here, and you would be amazed to know what these cages are going for on eBay right now. There's a round swing in the middle. That's pretty much it. The food bowls are on the bottom. Here we got the little sandpaper perch on the swing. There might be one perch right there. And again, that cage looks awful lot like my cage. Okay. I never really kept them swinging because I always thought the bird was moving, but the picture on the bottom, right down here, that is more acceptable. It's too small. I'll say that right off the bat. It's too small, but that is the shape that a canary needs more than the one I bought that was wood that they couldn't get up to the top. So a lot of times back then, this is what we had. Everybody who had birds back then knows this little white perch with the little, you know, tab on the end. You stick it in there and twist, and the perch stays. It might have been maybe 6 inches or 8 inches long, but it was plastic. And then you have the other piece of plastic. Just imagine an extremely tiny little piece of PVC that you could kind of sort of bend, and it had little plastic things on the end. Or you had the typical dowel. So those are our options. And then of course, then you have these awful sandpaper perches that really do more damage than good, because you don't want the birds chewing on it and ingesting it. And it's very rough on their feet. You get a lot of sores, a lot of problems with them. And then you have the typical little bird swing. I can't tell you how many of the Penplex products I bought when I was a child, going back to that bird store and, you know, seeing what they had and coming home with another swing. So, you know, all, you know, 12 parakeets all had swings, but that was the typical stuff that you had with the perches back then. We didn't have the things we have now, which is again involved, and it's great for us and great for our birds. Fun fact is the Hendricks Company began manufacturing bird cages in the United States in 1869. The brand is still viable today as Preview Pet Products, Preview Hendricks line. So here you have a 1930s brass bird cage. This is what you would see on the bottom, probably under the tray. Some of them had trays, some did not. These little things right here, these are like little screens, and they would go here to hold the mess on. Again, here's your little swing. Here's your perch scraper. I have to laugh now because I still use a knife to scrape poop off of perches. You know, I guess reading my book from the 1960s. I'm sure there's other things that are out there that are better, but I've told a lot of people to use that when they had really stubborn stuff they had to get off. And then you'll see the newer line by Preview. I did have some of those in the start. The 18th century brought the age of enlightenment and more aesthetic values. In 1889, this birdhouse and aviary was commissioned by the Garden of Versailles, and the cages were so decorative and embellished that the birds inside were only incidental. The elaborate cages were usually for the extremely wealthy European homes, and some were purely decorative, like the wooden, not really intended for avian residents. The budgies were introduced in England in 1800s, and let's see. Yeah, in the 1800s. You guys can come back and read this as you go on. But a lot of the intricate cages were copied off of the Taj Mahal, the Crystal Palace. This is another thing. I decided I didn't know if I should put this in there, so the picture's kind of small. This is another fact. I didn't put fun fact because I don't think it's fun. Parrot feathers and even the preserved bodies decorated ladies' hats in 1800s. A sight that would be met with horror today, especially if I saw something like that. So, but this was probably more of a status symbol, that they would put that on their hats, to get them all pretty and fancy. I was trying to look for a better picture and that one popped up, so that's why it's there. Now we have some fun facts. These are from the 1970s. These are from Susan Chamberlain. 1972, the Laurel Park was founded in I can't say that, Tenerife, Spain. I've never been to Spain, so I don't know how it's pronounced. 1973, references to effects of exposure of non-stick coatings in frying pans and such on cockatiels. We started referencing it back in 1973, but yet still people want to use them today. 1973, the Convention of International Trade on Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora is agreed upon at a meeting of 80 countries in Washington, D.C. In 1974, the American Federation of Aviculture was founded. Remember to come see me in September in North Carolina. I'll be there at the Lafeber's table. 1975, then we saw Fred on Beretta. And a lot of people started getting interested in birds again once seeing Fred on there. I actually had a Triton myself at one point. So those are some fun facts. So to wrap it up here, I want to leave some time for questions. Hopefully I don't see a clock. In the 70s, I brought my first parakeet home on St. Patrick's Day at age 8, and it was really just on a fluke. Quickly followed by more parakeets, so they had a flock of their own when I wasn't there. That probably also came from my book somewhere. Their diet was severely limited, fed gravel and grit, and stood on sandpaper. While I didn't know much, we learned together and we grew together. So the lessons I learned as a child bringing forward. I was responsible for my pets. Again, this is why I foster young people in aviculture. It's important for us to all do this, for everybody to continue. And I hope to see more veterinarians come forward and become board certified and part of the AAV to help us as owners as we continue. So I was responsible for my pets, me and me only. My mother told me if I didn't take care of those pets, she was going to get rid of them. So that was my daily focus. They needed care each day. They were the first thing that I did every morning and every night before I went to bed. It's still the same today. I get up, I take care of the birds. Once they're in their day cages, they have fresh food and water. Then I'll finally get my cup of coffee. Then I'll finally brush my hair and my teeth, but they're taken care of first and last. They needed a clean environment. Usually people say they can eat off my bird room floor. It's probably the cleanest room in the house. They gave me unconditional love when we moved around a lot. I didn't have a lot of friends. I can always count on what I had at home. They made me smile when I was scared and when I was lonely. Again, moving around a lot. That was my one solid piece that was always there. They were my constant companions and they were my families. My birds stayed with me through the 80s when they all passed away one by one. Because I was not the best steward, not knowing any better and being so young, I can only say they lived a long time on a whole bunch of love. Tweety lived to be 18, which is old for a parakeet. We were both 18 when she passed away. Animals are reliable, many full of love, true in their affections, predictable in their actions, grateful and loyal. Difficult standards for people to live up to. We all know how true that is. I'm going to pause on this for a second, only for people who want to come back and read this. Again, this was something I cut out as a young child, and I kept it folded up in my drawer, and I still have it to this day. Right now it's on my dresser in my bedroom. But this talks a little bit about a little parakeet, and it was how I felt, and it's a good thing to go back and read it on. And I want to thank you all for being here, and hopefully you learned a little something. Maybe you laughed along the way. Maybe if you leave notes like I do, maybe you realize you're not the only crazy person out there. So again, thank you for being here, and we'll stop sharing.
Lisa, that was awesome. I just thought you were so ahead of your time with your bird care. It was amazing. And those little notes of when you're little, oh my gosh, that just tugs at the heartstrings. That was adorable.
Yeah, well, my sister told me she had that. I'm like, wait, what? She goes, yeah, you were going up to Nantucket and you wrote, a letter, and my mother must have kept it. When she picked up the bird, she must have picked up the letter. And then my mother, my sister was helping her clean out. My sister must have taken it to her house. And this week I wrote to her, I said, I need that letter. I need to read it to everybody. And another funny thing is, after going up to Nantucket, coming home again, the child in me, we went to Nantucket and we went to Martha's Vineyard. I came home and told everybody that I was going to grow up and live in Martha's Vineyard.
Well, there you go. So everything else was realized. It seems like the birds.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that was awesome. And I have to give a shout out. I did not know Susan Chamberlain was going to be on with us today. And oh my gosh, so I had to grab this. So Susan was one of our columnists at Bird Talk. She did the urban bird. And I always felt like Susan was like almost like our Martha Stewart of the bird world. She had just such great tips that made it so you felt like you could replicate what she did, but I always failed. And one of the things, just real quick, what Susan made is we asked her to make a giant bird costume that she sewed together and mailed to us. At least you have to give me a thumbs up if you remember this, or a shout out. But Melissa Kaufman, the former editor of Bird Talk, she wore it in like this exercise video that I think should go viral. But yeah, the costume was so fantastic. But anyways, it's really good to see Susan's name. She was one of another pioneer of the bird world is Susan, and of course Lisa. So wow. I
was doing this topic, I knew she wrote some articles, and I was searching all over for them. And with a lot of the articles that went for Bird Talk and then Bird Channel, they're here and they're there. So I wrote her and I asked her if I could use some of her stuff, and she sent me a wonderful article. Susan, I didn't get the chance to write you yet, but that article she sent me was fabulous. And yeah, so she's been a big help. So thank you.
I actually an article on the history of bird cages for us. It's anyway, it's so good to see people that you just, you really, really appreciated working with and being able to, be in their world. So Susan was one of those people. And I have to give this, okay, so I have to announce, we have so many announcements. Once again, it is our 5th anniversary of doing these webinars. So just real quick, next Friday, we're going to be on with Dr. Lamb. And she's going to do a deep dive topic. She's going to start doing deeper dives into specific topics. And she's going to be talking about avian gastric yeast. So next Friday, we'll be doing that. Okay, so it is our 5th anniversary, and I have some giveaways. I have 5 people that are going to win a giveaway, and it's something that we're going to unveil right now. I'm going to try to okay, I just got this the latest image in. I'm going to try to share it properly, but you know how shares go with this stuff, right? You never know what Zoom's going to do. So let's see here. I'm going to try to share my screen, and we have a new flavor of Nutriberries coming out. And while I share this, I'm just curious if anyone wants to take a guess in the chat feature. If anyone wants to guess what the newest and greatest Lafeber. Let's see. Oh, I don't know what it's doing here. Anyway, I hope you can see that. My screen is a mess, but it's going to be Apple Nutriberries. Latest and greatest is going to be Apple Nutriberries. There we go. So I'm going to give away, sorry, I don't know if you can see, I have a little pop up on my screen. So we're going to give away five of those to 5 lucky people today. And those go out to Candy Eastock, Conrad Richardson, Mary Kukura, Linda Lehman, and Anita Murthy. Congratulations. Those are all going to go out to Apple Nutriberries. And we also have a coupon code for everyone that joined us today. You can order, let's see, I got to give you the coupon code. Bear with me. So much going on today. Okay, it is going to be 15% off your next order at lafeber.com, and it's for attendees only. Limit 1 per attendee, valid until May 1st. So the coupon code is, ready, it is webinar 5th. So webinar, all one word, webinar 5, and then TH. So webinar 5th, that's the secret code. So you can order and get 15% off your next order at lafeber.com. So yeah, so there we go. New flavor. I love apples, so I'm excited. I wanted to bite into this so often. Just kidding.
And my guys got some samples and they really liked them.
All right, guys. So keep a lookout for that on the Lafeber shopping cart. And congratulations to our 5 giveaway winners today. It was great walk through history there. Look forward to seeing these series in the year ahead. All right, guys. On that note, I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. Go out and do something extra special to celebrate our 5th anniversary with us. I don't know what it could be, but we gotta celebrate somewhere. This is such a wealth of information. So Lisa, you've been there for so long with us on your Fridays. It's very generous of you. Appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it.
All right, guys. On that note, everyone have a fantastic weekend. All the best to you and your flock. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.